no justice.
And Kenda must figure out why.
Whatever happened started right here.
Drop the keys out the window. Do it now.
You're being handled here at gunpoint.
Back up the car.
Don't do something stupid.
Then, a church of God turns into a house of horrors.
I am the Lord Jesus Christ.
They were praying for their lives.
He has an inherent violence about him.
Don't touch the knife, Richard.
He's not complying. He's just kind of staring right through us.
Don't do it, Richard!
In my business, you become a very light sleeper. I had a lot of people wanted to kill me, among other things. If I would hear any noise, I was awake. I was not just awake, I was wide awake. This is the way our life was. It was from one event to the next.
It's the middle of the night. Larry and Kelly Schlott are asleep. When all of a sudden,
Larry, what's that?
Sounds like someone at the front door.
Who the hell could it be at this hour of the night?
I'll go check it out. Stay here.
Larry, what are you doing?
Larry picks up a baseball bat. He's ready to use it if he has to.
Louise?
But he's shocked when he opens the door. His neighbor Louise is crying and frantic.
It's Peter, he's been shot. I don't have a weapon, I need you to help me.
She knew that Larry knew CPR, so she asked him to come render aid to Pete.
Oh my God. Pete! 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 Oh my God.
Obviously has serious injuries.
Oh God.
Hold on, Pete. You with me, buddy?
Larry knows it's not working. It's not going to be able to save him.
A few miles north, Sergeant Joe Kenda is struggling with his own personal battle.
I don't sleep well. And I would often slip out the front door and be on my front porch and smoke a cigarette and think about all the things I've done and all the things I've seen and cannot unsee. And now here we go again.
Within the hour, Kenda arrives on scene and meets with Detective Skip Arms.
Hey, Skip.
Evening, Joe.
When I arrived on scene, there was very little activity going on. There was no traffic in the streets. It was really very quiet. So what we got?
We've got one shooting victim, shot multiple times. He left here in the ambulance alive, but we're not sure what his status is now.
You got an ID?
Yes.
The officer says that the victim is a 35-year-old male whose name is Peter Martinez. He was shot in the front yard of his own home.
Any witnesses?
Martinez's wife and kids were in the house at the time of the shooting, but they've gone to the hospital with him in the ambulance. That's about it.
They've already awakened several of their direct neighbors, all of whom say they didn't see anything. So the only thing left for us there is the crime scene itself. You can learn a lot from a crime scene if you listen and pay attention. The crime scene will speak to you. It will whisper, but it will speak to you.
The victim was lying here when the medical arrived. What's that?
Looks like a crescent wrench.
Let's make sure we have that dusted for prints. It would appear that the crescent wrench would have some role in this situation. It potentially could have either been an offensive or a defensive weapon.
We also got some casings over here.
How many?
5 total, 25 caliber.
We also found slugs in the yard, too. The front yard appeared to be trampled down, so that indicated that perhaps there was some kind of struggle that may have occurred on the yard and then moved into the street. Whatever happened started right here.
My experience tells me there's a confrontation. Words get exchanged, threats are made, things get out of hand, and it ends with gunfire.
Which hospital was the victim transported to?
St. Francis.
Okay, Skip, I'll meet you there.
Works for me.
So for now, we've learned all we can here. We need to respond to the hospital where our victim is to determine A, his condition, and more importantly, B, that's where we believe we're going to find our witnesses.
Mr. Martinez was shot 5 times in all. Once in the shoulder, chest, stomach, and twice in the arm. He's in surgery now, but it looks doubtful. You know, another thing that you should probably be aware of is that the medics said they found him in his boxer shorts when they first picked him up.
Really?
The odds are he was either getting ready for bed or was already in bed. And when he was awakened by something, he came out in his underwear, and whatever happened next resulted in 5 holes in him that he didn't have a little while earlier.
Is his family around?
His wife and children in the lobby.
Yeah, thanks, Doc.
So we encounter first the wife of the victim, Louise, and she has 2 sons that are with her, Peter Jr. and Eric.
Excuse me. I'm Sergeant Kenda, and this is Detective Irons.
I'm Louise.
Do you think we could talk to you for a minute with you and your sons?
Well, I'd prefer if they had a little more time, but I can talk to you.
They're worried about their father. No point in even attempting a conversation with them.
Could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your husband?
Well, we aren't technically married, but Peter and I have been together for over 15 years.
And everything was good between you guys?
Yeah, we had a good relationship. We actually work together, so we argue sometimes, but nothing serious.
Peter and Louise are both custodians at a building downtown. Doesn't pay a lot of money and it's hard work, but they get to work together and they enjoy that. And it's something that Louise really is happy about, that she gets to spend her days working with the love of her life.
So what exactly happened last evening?
Well, Peter and I were working and we got home around 10:30.
They went in to check on their boys, and they then made their way to bed.
I'm exhausted. What do we have going on tomorrow, babe?
Eric's got baseball in the afternoon, and I'm meeting Lucy for lunch.
All right, well, I think I'm just gonna go get some stuff for this weekend.
Wake up, Peter!
What the hell's that?
He goes and opens the door.
Peter!
And it's his sister, Karen Michaels.
What's up, brother? You gonna let me in or what?
And her friend Lucia, and they are both extremely intoxicated.
Hey, Louise! Let's have a drink.
They had been at a party, and they came over there to keep the party underway.
Peter and his sister get along?
Sort of. I mean, Karen can be a real pain in the ass.
He was really sometimes super annoyed with her because of her manners and why she lived her life the way she did, of which he did not approve. He thought she drank too much and too often, and so on. So there's always this back and forth between he and his sister, and now his sister's at his front door.
At first, Peter was annoyed, but after a while, he started to loosen up and relax.
I don't know what either one of you are talking about.
I remember the old days.
No, you don't.
And they open some beers, and they turn on some music, and they're talking, and they're actually enjoying themselves.
I hope they do another block party. Yeah, I gotta take a leak. I'll be back.
Everything seemed to be going well.
What's that song?
You can change it. If you want, the stereo's in Junior's room. Just try to be quiet. He's sleeping. You want another?
Yeah. You know me?
But all of a sudden, something happened.
And Louise heard some type of a commotion in Peter Jr.'s room.
You ass! Come on, Lucia, let's go.
Wait, why?
I said, come on, let's get the hell out of here.
What happened? Karen, what's wrong?
Your dead husband.
Louise asked Peter what happened, and his response was, "Oh, that's just Karen. Good riddance, I'm glad she's gone." They then went to bed.
Not 30 minutes after we laid down, we heard people shouting outside.
Come out here, you ass! Peter, come outside, jackass!
Damn it, Karen!
Louise looks out the window.
Get your ass out here, you prick!
she sees two cars, a red car and a gray car. And there's a bunch of people out there, and she doesn't know who these people are.
What were they saying?
I don't know, but they sounded upset.
So Louise is going to call 911 to report this problem.
911, what's your emergency?
But before she can say a word...
Hi, there's... So I dropped the phone and I ran outside. The red car was gone and the gray one was pulling away. And Peter was just lying there in the street, all alone.
Do you think Karen could have shot Peter?
I don't think so. I mean, it's her own brother.
Okay, you said you saw a gray car. Do you know what type of car it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Having this information at hand, it's important for us to try to find the gray car.
Sergeant Kenda, dispatch.
And the occupants of the car.
How do you put on APB?
So we offer the description of the suspect vehicle over the air to all officers, all points, bulletin, a suspect vehicle in what probably is a fatal shooting, consider armed and dangerous.
Luckily, it doesn't take long for an officer to spot the vehicle in question.
31 to dispatch.
Dispatch to 31.
Got eyes on that possible suspect vehicle. Go ahead and send me back up 2000 block of Corona Street.
We basically call it a felony traffic stop.
Driver, turn off the car and drop the keys out the window.
They fear that the occupants are potentially involved in a serious violent felony crime.
Do it now!
So the driver was directed to exit first.
Driver, step out, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them.
He was a tall, black male, which didn't fit the descriptions.
Back up to the sound of my voice. Do it now.
Passenger, step out of the car. Do it now.
When the passenger steps out of the car,
hands on your head.
She is Karen Michaels, sister of the victim. How convenient. So now we do have the right car, and we certainly have the right people. Now this situation has become dangerous. We're investigating the shooting of a father of two children, Peter Martinez. And patrol officers have just stopped a car that was seen fleeing from the scene.
Driver, step out, slowly.
Containing an occupant that was involved in a disturbance with the victim.
On your knees!
You're being handled here at gunpoint. Don't do something stupid.
Don't move.
Because of the short time frame between the shooting and the contact of this vehicle,
all right, stand up.
The chances were very high the occupants were involved in the crime.
Put your hands behind your back. Do it now.
So they had to be treated as potentially violent felony suspects.
It's clear. Clear.
So the two occupants were driven to the Detective Bureau. And once there, they were placed in separate rooms.
So what do you want to do?
Why don't you take Karen and I'll talk to this guy?
Works for me.
This individual identifies himself as Hank Michaels, and he is Karen Michaels' husband. And they have this car registered in both of their names.
Is someone gonna finally tell me what the hell is going on?
I was actually hoping that you'd be the one to do that.
We know Karen left the house upset. Did she go home and tell her husband that she had this fight with her brother? And did he come back over to the house in his gray car to avenge his wife?
How'd you end up going for a drive with your wife so early in the morning?
Man, I was sleeping. And Karen came home all worked up.
He says his wife woke him up when she came home. She said she got in a terrible fight with her brother, and she wants him to drive her to her mother's house.
And you didn't ask what went on between her and Peter?
No, they're always arguing about something. And besides, Karen was drunk, and I did not want to get her going. So I just drove her to her mother's house.
And as they were in the act of doing that, they're stopped by the police, and they got guns pointed at him, and he doesn't know what's going on.
So you never went to Peter's house at all?
No, not at all.
So there's Hank's story. Is that believable? Well, maybe it is. Think back to Louise. Louise says she sees Karen and some people. If this guy is there to defend his wife, he's the one knocking on the door.
So we try to find a record for Hank. He doesn't have a record. He's clean. At face value, there's no reason to believe he's being deceptive to us. So now our next step is to want to talk with Karen and see where that takes us.
Wake up, Miss Michaels.
What the hell are you doing?
I want to talk to you about your brother.
Which brother?
Karen Michaels is beyond drunk. She's loaded, and she couldn't hit the ground with her hat.
Your brother Peter? Peter Martinez?
What about him?
He was shot 5 times. Do you happen to know who did that to him?
I ain't talking until I get a lawyer.
Well, you're drunk, Karen, but you know enough to keep your mouth shut when you're in a jam. And guess what, baby cakes? You are in a jam.
All right. Well, we're still going to hold you for the time being.
Whatever.
So have we gotten very far? No. We have her, which is useful, but she has nothing to say to us. So now we need another pathway to find out who we're looking at.
So we felt that with some time passing, we would want to circle back and see if either Louise knew anything new or if by this point either of her sons were willing to talk.
Have you received any word on your husband?
He went in for another surgery, so we're just here to get something to eat before heading back.
We were wondering if either one of your sons might be able to talk to us.
I really don't think Eric is, but Junior could probably talk to you. Junior, come here for a minute.
Peter Jr. is in high school. We think he's our best shot because he's a little older and maybe a little less emotional.
Can I have a seat?
And maybe a little more honest.
Junior, did you happen to see any of what happened to your father last night?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened?
I was sleeping in my bedroom when my Aunt Karen woke me up. Hey, Karen, what's going on?
How do you work this thing?
They had long lengths of speaker wire coming from the stereo in the son's bedroom to the speakers in the living room area. Peter Jr. says she wants to change the music, that she can't make this thing operate.
Hey, Karen! Karen, what the hell are you doing in here? Damn it, Karen, don't be disrespecting my house. Just look at my son!
The your radio's crap.
Karen, get the hell out of my son's room now.
Oh, shut up. What you gonna do?
He slaps her open hand in the face hard.
You're always walking around here drunk asking me for money. You don't respect no one. Get out of here.
Go to hell, Peter, you asshole!
She stormed out of the room and my dad told me to go back to sleep. But a little while later, something woke me up again.
Wake up, Peter!
He was awakened, so he gets up in a haze, looks out the window. He sees his aunt, Karen Michaels. Her children are with her.
What are you doing, you crazy?
And they are in an argument.
Did you see what happened?
Well, I ran outside and tried to help. Hey, Dad, what's going on? Off my property.
Whatever.
You care? Get the out of here. Dad, Junior, go get my gun.
And the kid says, I didn't know what he meant because we don't have a gun. I guess he was trying to bluff him.
Hey, calm down. Calm down.
Apparently it worked because he saw Karen and the kids start retreating.
I went back inside because I thought it was over, but it wasn't.
Peter Jr. says,
oh my God, Dad!
He heard several gunshots.
As the gray car drove away, Peter Jr. tells us that he was able to see the person that was in the passenger seat, and that is most likely our shooter. This is the break we need.
Did you recognize him?
Yes, I know who it is.
This whole search process in this investigation has to be to find a good witness, and we have just discovered a star witness. Now, who might this shooter be? We're investigating the shooting of Peter Martinez, who was gunned down in front of his own home.
Oh my God, Dad!
We've now learned that his son, Peter Jr., got a good look at the shooter.
So what's the guy's name?
Jake Ferguson.
So Jake is our dude. It isn't Karen, and it's certainly not her husband.
Who's Jake Ferguson?
He dates my cousin Nina.
The information that Peter Jr. could give us about Jake is he's a white male. He's about 18 years old or so.
He's only been in town a few weeks, but everybody classifies him as a bully, and everybody knows that Jake always has a gun.
Do you know where we could find this Jake?
I think he's in the army or something.
Thank you for talking to us. Yeah, we'll let ourselves out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we drive over to Fort Carson, and we find out that Mr. Ferguson is living and working on Fort Carson as a private E1 in the United States Army. So we have to elicit the cooperation of military police authorities, and they snatch up Jake Ferguson in a heartbeat.
Jake, I'm with the Colorado Springs Police Department. Do you know why I'm here?
I think so.
You can just see it in his eyes. It's obvious that he's scared. As someone who interviews and interrogates people, you need to gear your questioning based on what you see in order to be effective.
Am I under arrest?
Not at the moment. But I need to know what happened last night.
Okay. I'll tell you everything.
He didn't hold back. He really needed to get this off his chest.
I was at my girlfriend Nina's house, and we had a few beers, watched a movie, and then I fell asleep on the couch when her brother Rico woke me up. Jake, come on, get up, man.
What's going on?
Come on, we've got to go.
Nina?
She's already in the car. We got to help my mom. You got your gun?
Yeah, right.
All right, let's go.
The brother Rico tells Jake they're going to go settle a fight between Nina's mom and her brother Peter Martinez.
He sees this as an opportunity to be an enforcer, to go help the family defend their honor, so to speak.
Who went to Peter's house?
Karen was hammered, so I drove her car. Nina, Rico, and their other sister Marta were in another car.
Peter, come out here. I want to talk to you. You ain't gonna hit our mom.
Get your ass out here, Uncle Peter.
I kind of hung back by the car while they went up to the house to confront Peter.
Come out here.
Peter jerked the door open, already in a rage.
Karen, what the you doing, you crazy bitch?
You a big man hitting a woman, Uncle Peter?
Off my property.
And is screaming and yelling and using obscenities toward Karen Michaels and her children.
Man, look to control your kids. You don't get to tell me what to do with my kids. I'm gonna kick you, Peter.
Beat his ass, Mom.
Jake says a scuffle begins, followed by them falling down and rolling around in the dirt in the front yard.
Beat his ass, Mom.
Off my property.
Jake said that Karen actually pulled Peter's pants off, leaving him just in his underwear. And then she started laughing at him.
You, Karen? Touch me again.
Hey, do something.
Dad,
come on.
what's going on? Hey, Junior, go get my gun. Get in the car. You want me to drive?
So they started heading back to the cars. I go to get in the front, but Karen insisted on driving.
Come on, damn it.
Because Karen was drunk, she was having difficulty getting the car started.
Get the hell out of here. What's wrong with you? Yo, back up the car. What are you, deaf? Are you drunk and stupid? Huh? So back off the car, old man. What'd you call me? Think you're tough, white boy?
Jake says that he then sees Peter reach for his waistband and pull out an object he said was long and shiny
Jake panics and empties that gun into Peter Martinez from a range of 3 or 4 feet. And every bullet he fires hits him.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Give me the gun. Give me the gun. It's not like he wasn't asking for it.
Even though she was still pretty intoxicated, the fact that she didn't care whether or not her brother just got shot is pretty callous.
What did Karen do with the gun?
I don't know. I think she has it somewhere in the house.
Well, Jake, I appreciate you being honest with me, but I'm gonna have to place you under arrest. Go ahead and cuff him.
Peter Martinez has been pronounced dead at the hospital. So now it's no longer attempted murder, it's just murder.
After Jake Ferguson's confession, investigators go to the house of Karen Michaels in search of the murder weapon.
We find a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol that's obviously been wiped clean, but ballistics says this is the weapon that fired the shots that killed Peter Martinez.
Jake was charged with second-degree murder. Karen was charged with accessory to the second-degree murder. And then the district attorney ultimately made the decision to take this case to a grand jury. And after the case was presented to the grand jury, they came back with a no true bill.
Meaning that, in their opinion, there's insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jacob Ferguson engaged in criminal behavior. So Mr. Ferguson was released without charges, and therefore so was Karen Michaels. And the matter was closed.
You know, it's the kind of thing where really there was no justice for Peter, no justice for his family, because nobody had to be accountable for what happened to him. Had Peter gone back in the house, closed the door, would he still be alive today? Just makes you wonder. It was just a sad set of circumstances that cost somebody their life.
Mix old family hatreds, loss of control of your emotions, and alcohol, and it often results in violent death. That's a terribly sad thing in the case of Peter Martinez.
Coming up, an unhinged madman threatens the safety of an entire church congregation.
You all will die today.
This is St. Mary's Cathedral. How could this have happened in here?
In January of 1996, a church service was going on. It was Sunday morning, downtown.
How are you?
Near the end of the first service, an usher, Ron Meredith, is passing the collection plate, like they do every Sunday. But a man is sitting in the back and just seemed a little out of it.
These people don't know what the hell they're doing.
Give it to me. Excuse me, sir. That's not yours. Give it to me, damn it. Give me that.
There was a lot of confusion.
Sir, back off.
Ron is able to grab it, and the deranged man told everybody,
I am the Lord Jesus Christ, and you all will die today.
That made people very, very nervous.
Honey, call the police.
Later that morning, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is on his way into work.
Dispatch to X-ray 1.
The radio cracks and it said 1 X-ray 1. My call sign.
Go for X-ray 1.
Report of a shooting on Bijou Street. Redirect immediately.
Copy that. I'm on the way.
Ooh. On a Sunday morning when this town is either in church or still asleep? Pretty unusual. I arrived at the address before I realized this is St. Mary's Church. It's a huge church and beautiful building. Been there for many, many years. My parents got married there in 1938.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning. So what in the world's going on here?
Come inside, take a look.
So I walk in that church, as I had done many times. I'm directed to the men's room.
Whoa.
This is St. Mary's Cathedral. How could this have happened in here?
Less than an hour before Lieutenant Kenda arrived on scene, chaos was just beginning to unfold at St. Mary's.
Hello, 911?
911, what's your emergency?
A man just tried to steal from our church, and then he threatened to kill us. And I'm afraid he's going to try to come back.
We'll send units immediately.
Okay, thank you.
CSPD officers immediately respond, including patrolman Robert Benjamin.
In January of '96, I was in the patrol division.
Who here put in the call? Yeah, right here, we did. Is the suspect still inside?
No, he fled. Came in, tried to take our collection plate, and threatened everybody.
Where's the rest of the congregation?
They're inside.
Okay. Can you describe this guy?
Well, he's a pretty big guy.
Mr. Meredith told me he was kind of a stocky build, about 180 pounds.
As Ron is talking to the police, something interesting happened.
Yeah, I think I know this guy. His name's Deersmith. Richard Deersmith.
You sure about that?
Yeah, things happen pretty quickly in there, but I'm pretty sure it's him.
So now they're just looking for a description. They're looking for Richard Deersmith.
Give me a moment, please. Gulf 85 to dispatch. Can I get an APB and a white male? 6'2", 180 pounds, named Richard Deersmith.
When officers call in the suspect's name,
Patrol, did you say Deersmith?
it immediately raises red flags.
That's right.
You have a pen handy?
So they find out that Mr. Deersmith has a rather extensive criminal record.
So apparently our suspect has been arrested 17 times in 3 different states. 2 of those were for assaulting an officer.
So you take that in sum, and this not only is a disturbed person, but he has an inherent violence about him. And he's physically capable of carrying it out.
We have his name and description out there. We're looking for him. You call us if anything else happens.
Thank you so much.
The police leave the scene and start looking for the suspect in the neighborhood.
He resides in the area. Witnesses in his neighborhood report they saw Deersmith leave his house carrying his large knife, which they say is routine for him. He's always ranting out loud and talking to himself or to invisible people, and they are very frightened of him. He's obviously deeply disturbed.
While officers are busy canvassing the area, the congregation picks up where it left off.
A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthian brothers and sisters. Strive eagerly for the greatest spiritual gifts. Love is patient.
At that time,
love is kind.
Richard Deersmith returns to the church. And this time, he's got a knife in a sheath on his belt.
And if I have the gift of prophecy, to comprehend mysteries.
Deersmith did something kind of interesting and maybe unexpected. That he went straight to the bathroom. The people who really deserve a lot of credit, the quick-thinking ushers.
We need to get the police back out here.
Hey! I said get me out of his room!
Within moments, Officer Benjamin and company are back on the scene.
God will punish you for this!
He's been going crazy in there.
Hey! Hey!
Does he have any weapons on him?
Yeah, he's got a knife.
We're going to his room!
Lots of thoughts going through my head, knowing we have a combative suspect in front of us.
Okay, let's get out of here.
It was not the first time that he had been involved in potential violence towards police.
Hey!
The three officers go to the door.
Somebody get me out of here!
Unlock the door.
Hands up, Richard! Put your hands up, Richard. Hands up! Don't do that, Richard.
The ushers hear somebody say, "Don't do it, buddy. Don't do it."
Richard, no! Don't do it, Richard! Richard, stop!
The church services continue after the dust settles from the emotion of this event. And it's no more than a few minutes after the officers leave, Richard Deersmith comes back in the church. He has a knife, and he's locked in a bathroom.
Hands up, Richard! Hands up!
The police open the door, guns drawn, because they didn't know what they were going to find.
Hey! Richard, stop!
The ushers heard a gunshot, and they thought, God, what is going on in there?
That's when the officers come out. And on their radio,
Need a medical down at the church right now.
a shooting officer involved. As I walk in, I see Richard Deersmith lying dead on the floor with a single gunshot wound in the upper left chest. And you stand there for a moment in that doorway and you look in this men's room and you think, why would that happen? We need to find that out.
Shortly after Kenda examines the crime scene, an investigator from the district attorney's office arrives to assist.
On any officer-involved shooting, the district attorney's office is called immediately. And there's definitely still a lot to figure out.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need to talk to everybody involved.
Of course.
The district attorney's office conduct all police officer-involved shootings independently of the police department. They are investigating why is it necessary for the police to use great force to effect his arrest.
So we teamed all of our investigators and detectives up together and started interviewing all the potential witnesses.
The eyewitness interviews help investigators piece together exactly what happened when Deersmith returned to the church.
When the ushers at the church saw Deersmith come back,
I am the sound of God, or a flashing symbol.
With a knife.
And if I have the gift of prophecy,
they were scared. As they had the opportunity to lock him in the bathroom,
Hey! God will punish you for this! Hey! Let me out!
they found the miracle they were praying for.
When Officer Benjamin responded for the second time,
Oh, God!
he knew the suspect had a history of assaulting police.
I was worried about the safety of the parishioners that were in the church.
Somebody get me
He's
out
been
of
in
here!
there going crazy. He's got a knife.
let's go this way.
At the time, all three officers had their hands on their guns. They were ready for anything. They knew he was armed at this point.
Somebody get me out of here!
Police, hands up! Hands up, Richard! Put your hands up, Richard.
Deersmith has the knife. It's a 10-inch blade Bowie knife. Very large knife.
Turn around, Richard. Turn around, walk backward toward me. Turn around.
He's not complying. He's just kind of staring right through us.
Turn around, Richard. Richard, turn around and slowly walk back toward me. Good. Keep your hands visible. Okay, back up toward me. Very good. Hands up. Keep your hands up where I can see them. Nice and slow. Good. Good. Hands up. Do not put that hand down. Do not touch that knife, Richard.
There's something called a continuum of force, and this is how police officers are trained. You confront someone, you announce to them that they're under arrest. If they physically resist you, you are authorized by law to use whatever force is necessary to overcome that resistance.
Don't do that, Richard. Do not touch that knife. Stop!
I am the Lord Jesus Christ!
These people don't know what the hell they're doing.
Oh, God! Lord, let me out!
Richard, do not touch that knife! Don't do it, Richard! Richard, no!
Richard, stop!
She reached for the knife. At that particular point, quite frankly, it's tough to sleep. You know, it just plays continually in your head, and you eventually come to the conclusion that you had to do what you had to do, and it was necessary, and you know, you just move on from that, but you never forget.
I was very fortunate in all of my years as a policeman, even though I displayed my weapon probably 20,000 times. I never pulled a trigger, never once. We're in the business of saving people, not killing them. Officers try anything to avoid it, and they suffer sometimes for the rest of their days if they're called upon to do it.
The night New York stopped listening was cold enough to sharpen breath into knives, and somewhere between the last subway doors slamming shut and the first sirens bleeding into dawn, a young woman vanished without a sound, without a struggle loud enough to wake the city that prides itself on never sleeping. Her name was whispered once over a crackling radio, logged into a precinct ledger with tired ink, and then swallowed by the noise. 24 hours later, the word missing hardened into something heavier. 48 hours later, it became a cold case in the making. And even now, decades later, the question still cuts through the static. How do you disappear in a city built to watch everything? She was last seen just after midnight, stepping out of a bar on the Lower East Side, the kind of place where the lights are low and the memories are supposed to be blurry by design. Friends said she was fine, laughing, steady on her feet, waving off an offer to share a cab because her apartment was close, because New York felt safe when you knew the shortcuts. The security camera across the street caught her silhouette crossing the frame, coat pulled tight, head down against the wind. That was it. No scream, no stumble, no second image to tell investigators where the story bent into something darker. By morning, her phone rang unanswered. By afternoon, her voicemail was full. By evening, flyers were already curling at the corners on lampposts, her face printed in black and white, smiling in a way that felt almost accusatory, as if daring the city to explain itself. The community buzzed, shocked and unsettled, strangers suddenly alert to footsteps behind them, doormen watching the street a little longer than usual. New York thrives on anonymity, but this was different. This felt personal. Detectives canvassed the block, knocked on doors, asked the same questions until their voices went hoarse. Did you hear anything? Did you see anyone? Did she leave with someone you didn't recognize? The answers blurred together. No. I don't think so. The bartender remembered her tab. The bouncer remembered her jacket. A cab driver thought maybe he saw her arguing with a man near the corner, but couldn't be sure, couldn't swear to it. Memory is a slippery witness, especially when the clock is already ticking. They found her bag 3 days later in a trash can 2 miles away, folded too neatly to be accidental. Her wallet was inside, cash untouched, cards still there, the phone gone. That detail landed like a punch. Robbery didn't fit. Panic didn't fit. Someone had taken the time to stage what little evidence remained, and that intention scared people more than the disappearance itself. The headlines followed fast, each one louder than the last, each one sharpening the fear. Mysterious disappearance shocks community. Young woman vanishes without trace. Cold case looms as leads dry up. The apartment told its own quiet story. Bed made. Dishes in the sink. A half-read book face down on the nightstand. Nothing packed. Nothing missing. No sign she planned to leave. Her computer showed routine emails, mundane worries, plans for the weekend that never came. This wasn't an escape. It was an interruption. A life paused mid-sentence. Weeks passed. Tips flooded in at first, then thinned to a trickle. Psychics called. So did ex-boyfriends, old friends, distant acquaintances who wanted to be helpful or wanted to be heard. Each lead burned bright for a moment and then fizzled out, leaving behind the same empty space. Detectives argued quietly over theories. Crime of opportunity. Targeted attack. Wrong place, wrong time. None of them could make the pieces lock together. The city moved on because it always does. New stories replaced her face on the evening news. Another missing person. Another tragedy. But for her family, time froze. Birthdays passed uncelebrated. Holidays became endurance tests. Every unknown number on the phone carried a jolt of hope sharp enough to hurt. Every knock at the door felt like it might finally be the end of waiting, one way or another. Years slipped by. Evidence aged. Witnesses moved, forgot, died. The case file thickened with dust instead of answers. A cold case unit took it over, flipping through yellowed pages, listening to tapes that hissed with the ghosts of earlier urgency. They reran DNA that led nowhere. They rewalked the route she would have taken home, counting steps, measuring shadows, imagining how quickly a moment could turn irreversible. Still nothing. Then, in the summer of 2019, a call came in that nobody expected. It wasn't dramatic. No heavy breathing. No cryptic threat. Just a voice, calm, deliberate, claiming to know what happened that night in 2001. An anonymous tip, the kind detectives learn to distrust even as they lean in closer. The caller referenced details never released to the public. The trash can. The fold of the bag. The time window so narrow it had haunted the investigation for years. Enough to make seasoned officers exchange looks across a cluttered desk. The tip didn't offer closure. It offered direction. A name surfaced, one that had been buried in the margins of the original investigation, dismissed early, forgotten as resources shifted elsewhere. A man who lived 2 blocks away at the time. A man with no record, no obvious motive, no reason to stand out. Except that he'd moved abruptly a month after the disappearance. Except that he'd replaced his phone the very next day. Except that someone, somewhere, had remembered him after all these years. Detectives reopened old boxes, pulled surveillance tapes thought long erased, found fragments that technology could finally enhance. Grainy images sharpened just enough to suggest a second figure trailing her steps. Not proof. Not yet. But enough to make the room go quiet. Enough to make the words cold case cracked flicker at the edges of possibility. They tracked him down in another state, living a quieter life, a different name used casually but not legally changed. When questioned, he denied everything with practiced ease. He said he didn't remember her. Said he'd left New York for work. Said the timing was a coincidence. He passed a polygraph that meant nothing and everything at once. There was no physical evidence left to tie him to the night that swallowed her whole. Time had done its job too well. Still, the anonymous tip refused to fade. Investigators replayed the call, dissected every inflection, every pause. Who was the voice protecting? Who was it accusing? Why now? The city watched again, media dredging up old footage, neighbors revisiting their own memories, the fear returning in a different shape. This time, it was the fear of knowing how close the truth might be without ever quite touching it. For her family, the call reopened wounds they had learned to live around. Hope surged and receded in painful waves. The idea that someone might finally be held accountable clashed with the terror that the case would slip back into silence once more. Justice delayed has a way of feeling like justice denied, even when the story isn't finished yet. As months turned into another year, prosecutors hesitated. Circumstantial threads were strong, but not strong enough to survive a courtroom. The suspect walked free. The file stayed open. Officially active. Unofficially suspended in that familiar limbo between revelation and ruin. The anonymous tip had changed everything, and somehow nothing at all. New York kept moving, but some nights, when the wind cuts down those same streets and the bars spill their patrons onto the sidewalk, people still glance at the corners where cameras blink and shadows gather. They think about how easily a life can be erased, how a city can witness everything and still miss the moment that matters most. The case remains unsolved, its edges sharper now for having been disturbed, a reminder that even when the past speaks up, it doesn't always tell the whole truth. And somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened after that camera lost her silhouette, carrying an answer that still refuses to surface. The problem with reopening a wound is that it bleeds differently the second time, darker, slower, carrying with it the weight of everything that never healed. When the anonymous tip rippled through the precinct, it didn't feel like a breakthrough so much as a disturbance, like something long buried had shifted underground. Detectives who had retired called in favors just to listen in. Younger officers read the file like scripture, absorbing names and dates that predated their badges. The case wasn't just active again. It was alive, restless, demanding attention. They started where the original investigation had failed, the hours after midnight, compressed now into a forensic corridor of minutes. She left the bar at 12:17 a.m., confirmed by a timestamp that had survived multiple server migrations. The camera across the street caught her at 12:18, head turning briefly as if she'd heard something behind her. At 12:19, another camera down the block blinked, but the footage was corrupted, a strip of static where a story should have been. Back in 2001, that glitch was shrugged off. In 2019, it felt intentional, almost mocking. The anonymous caller had mentioned that camera without prompting, described its location, its angle, the way it always flickered in cold weather. That detail alone sent technicians digging through archives, thought wiped clean. A miracle of neglect preserved fragments no one expected to find. Frame by frame, they watched shadows slide across pavement, shapes blurring into suggestion. At 12:18 and 46 seconds, a second figure appeared, taller, moving faster, close enough to shorten the distance between them in just a few steps. The image froze there, indistinct but undeniable. She hadn't been alone. The suspect from the tip lived nearby at the time, close enough to make the route familiar. He worked nights occasionally, or so he said, which explained why neighbors rarely saw him. In 2001, that detail meant nothing. In 2019, it meant opportunity. His phone records from that era were gone, casualties of outdated systems and expired retention policies. But the caller insisted a call had been made that night, one that never showed up on the bill. A burner. A habit, maybe, or a single-use decision that changed everything. Investigators knocked on doors again, this time chasing ghosts. People were older, slower to answer, quicker to say they didn't remember. But memory has a way of returning when it's nudged hard enough. A woman on the third floor recalled hearing footsteps running past her window sometime after midnight, heavier than usual, followed by a car door slamming. She hadn't called it in back then. Noise was part of the city's rhythm. Now, her voice shook as she described it, as if she'd been carrying the sound around with her all these years without knowing why. Another neighbor remembered a man pacing outside the building in the weeks after the disappearance, smoking nervously, looking up at the windows as if expecting one to accuse him. That man fit the suspect's description. Or maybe it fit the description now, reshaped by hindsight and fear. Detectives wrote it down anyway. In cold cases, you collect everything, even doubts. The bag found in the trash can become central again. Forensic testing in 2001 was limited, cautious, easily overwhelmed by contamination. In 2019, technology was ruthless. Fibers emerged that didn't belong to her or the environment. A synthetic blend common in work gloves, the kind sold in bulk at hardware stores. The suspect had worked construction briefly that year. Coincidence stacked on coincidence until it began to feel deliberate. Still, there was no body. No crime scene soaked in certainty. Without that, everything remained theoretical, a lattice of possibility prosecutors circled but refused to step onto. The anonymous tipper called again, impatient now, pressing for action, dropping hints that felt like accusations. He said the suspect had panicked, said he'd never meant to kill her, said the city itself had helped cover it up by moving too fast, forgetting too quickly. The calls were traced as far as they could be traced, always ending in the same digital dead end. Media attention surged. Headlines screamed resurrection and reckoning. Her face returned to screens, older now only because the world had aged around it. The phrase cold case cracked appeared everywhere, bold and premature. Comment sections filled with speculation, armchair detectives weaving theories with alarming confidence. The suspect's new neighbors noticed the unmarked cars parked too long on their street. His employer received calls. His life tightened, constricted by a past he insisted wasn't his. When detectives confronted him again, they brought photographs this time. The grainy figure from the enhanced footage, the folded bag, the hardware store gloves. He stared at them longer than he should have. Long enough for silence to stretch thin. Then he smiled, just barely, and said nothing. His lawyer ended the interview before another word could land. Behind closed doors, the task force argued. Some believed the tip was genuine, a guilty conscience cracking under time's pressure. Others suspected manipulation, a vendetta, someone nudging the investigation toward an easy villain while the real story stayed hidden. Anonymous tips can save cases. They can also poison them. The line between the two is often invisible until it's too late. They re-examined her phone activity, focusing on the missing device. In 2001, its absence was frustrating. In 2019, it was damning. Phones hold maps, habits, secrets. Taking it wasn't about theft. It was about control. The tipper claimed it had been destroyed within hours, smashed and scattered, pieces fed to different trash routes, so no single landfill would ever tell the whole story. That level of foresight didn't match a crime of impulse. It suggested planning. Or experience. The family watched from a distance, careful not to hope too loudly. They'd learned how hope could betray you. Interviews were declined. Statements kept short. Privately, they asked the same question they'd asked for nearly 2 decades. If someone knows, why won't they say everything? Why drip-feed a truth that could end the waiting? As summer turned to fall, momentum slowed. Warrants stalled. Lab results took longer. The anonymous calls stopped as abruptly as they'd begun, leaving behind a louder silence than before. The suspect remained a suspect, nothing more. Legally untouched. Socially marked. The city exhaled, disappointed, restless, already half ready to move on again. But something had changed. The case was no longer just an absence. It had shape now, edges that cut. Investigators felt it in the way new tips referenced old ones, in the way people spoke her name with renewed certainty that it meant something. The past had been stirred, and even if it settled again, it wouldn't lie flat. On quiet nights, detectives replayed the footage once more, watching that shadow close in behind her, counting the seconds between her last confirmed step and the city's collective amnesia. Somewhere in that gap lived the truth, compressed and stubborn, waiting for a moment when it could no longer hide. The cold case wasn't solved. It was awake. And that, somehow, felt more dangerous than not knowing at all. Time does strange things to the truth. It erodes certainty, softens outrage, turns sharp facts into rounded edges that are easier to ignore. But sometimes, when a case is stirred too hard, time pushes back. In the months after the anonymous calls stopped, the investigation entered a phase detectives privately called the echo chamber, where every sound felt amplified because there was nothing new to chase. That's when they began to listen again to what had always been there. They pulled transcripts from old interviews, voices frozen in time, younger, less careful. One statement resurfaced with unsettling clarity. A woman who lived above the bar had mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she'd seen a man arguing with someone near the alley that night, his hands moving sharply, his body angled like he was blocking a path. In 2001, she couldn't identify the woman, couldn't describe the man beyond average. The note was buried. Now, read alongside the enhanced footage and the tip, it pulsed with relevance. Average was exactly how the suspect had survived unnoticed. The alley itself became a point of obsession. Narrow, poorly lit, a blind spot between 2 buildings that had since been renovated beyond recognition. Back then, it had been a corridor for dumpsters and delivery crates, a place the city didn't care to see. Investigators reconstructed it from blueprints and memory, marking where someone could have pulled another person out of sight in seconds. They measured distances, timed footsteps, tested how quickly a voice could be swallowed by traffic. The answer was always the same: faster than anyone wanted to believe. The anonymous tip returned to haunt them, not through another call, but through its implications. The caller had suggested a second location, a place outside the city, where something had been buried, not a body but evidence. Clothing. Shoes. A phone battery separated from the device. The problem was the place had changed hands twice since 2001. The ground had been turned over, landscaped, paved. Excavating it now would require cause they didn't have. Another door closed, another frustration added to the pile. Still, the idea lingered. Evidence doesn't vanish. It disperses. It hides. Sometimes it waits. A detective drove out there alone one evening, parking across the road, staring at the neat rows of houses that sat where scrubland once sprawled. He imagined the suspect younger, more reckless, choosing that spot because it felt empty, because it felt safe. Crimes often happen where someone believes no one is looking. They forget the ground remembers. Back in the city, pressure mounted. Journalists filed records requests, dissected timelines, criticized the original investigation with the clarity that only hindsight allows. Mistakes were named.
Opportunities missed.
The word failure hovered, unspoken but heavy. Veterans bristled. Younger detectives absorbed it quietly, determined not to repeat it. The cold case unit became a place of long hours and short tempers, of coffee gone cold beside screens, looping the same 10 seconds of footage. Then a new witness came forward, not with certainty, but with doubt. A former co-worker of the suspect from 2001 said he remembered a conversation, vague but persistent, about a girl who wouldn't shut up, about things getting out of hand. At the time, he dismissed it as bravado, the ugly humor of men blowing off steam. Now, the words replayed in his head with a different weight. He hadn't gone to police earlier because he hadn't trusted his own memory. Memory, again, was the weakest link. Detectives pressed him gently, then harder. Dates blurred. Names slipped. But the emotion felt real, the discomfort genuine. It wasn't enough for court. It was enough to keep digging. They mapped the suspect's movements that year through employment records, bank withdrawals, anything that could place him near the alley or beyond the city limits after the disappearance. Patterns emerged. Gaps appeared where there shouldn't have been any. Silence can be as incriminating as noise. The suspect sensed it too. Friends said he grew withdrawn, wary, scanning rooms the way people do when they expect recognition. He denied knowing her, denied remembering that night, denied everything with a consistency that felt rehearsed. When confronted with the co-worker's recollection, he laughed it off, called it nonsense. But laughter doesn't erase tension. It only masks it. Behind the scenes, prosecutors wrestled with strategy. Build a case now and risk losing it forever, or wait and hope for the one piece that could turn suspicion into certainty. Cold cases teach patience the hard way. Every move is a gamble against time, against fading memories, against a jury's tolerance for gaps. The anonymous tip had cracked the surface, but the foundation was still shaky. Her family received updates in carefully worded calls, progress described without promises. They learned to read between the lines, to hear what wasn't being said. When investigators mentioned new witnesses, their voices lifted. When the word insufficient crept in, everything sagged again. Grief doesn't age. It accumulates. Each year adds another layer, another reason the truth matters more than comfort. The city's attention waned and surged in cycles, tied to anniversaries and slow news days. Each resurgence reopened debates, reignited online accusations, drew amateur sleuths to the alley with cameras and theories. Some left flowers. Others left chalk markings where they believed the crime began. The ground was scrubbed clean by maintenance crews, but the marks returned, stubborn as memory. Late one night, a technician noticed something odd while reprocessing audio from the bar's exterior mic, a piece of evidence long thought useless. Beneath the music and traffic, a brief spike appeared, a sharp sound at 12:19 that hadn't been isolated before. A metallic clang. Maybe a dumpster lid. Maybe something dropped. Maybe nothing. Or maybe the exact moment control was lost. They enhanced it, filtered it, argued over it. It proved nothing and changed everything. Because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The cold case had entered its most dangerous phase, where possibility feels close enough to touch, but certainty remains out of reach. Investigators felt watched by the past, judged by it. The suspect felt cornered without being trapped. The family felt the familiar ache of almost. And somewhere, whether driven by guilt or fear or calculation, the anonymous tipsters stayed silent, leaving behind a trail that led everywhere except where it needed to go. New York kept breathing around the case, unaware of how close it might be to answers it had learned to live without. The alley stood unchanged in spirit, if not in structure, a narrow wound between buildings that refused to close. And every night, as the city's noise rose and fell, the same question lingered in the spaces between sounds, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally say what happened when the camera blinked and the world looked away. Silence can be strategic. It can also be a mistake. In the 4th year after the tip, with no charges filed and no confession secured, the task force faced a choice that felt reckless and inevitable at the same time. They went public with more than they ever had before, releasing select details they'd once guarded like ammunition. Not everything. Just enough to shake the tree and see what fell. The folded bag. The time window. The sound caught on the mic at 12:19. The city reacted the way it always does when fed partial truth, with hunger.
Calls poured in.
Most were noise. A few carried weight. One in particular refused to let go. A man in his late 40s phoned a local reporter instead of the police, voice unsteady, insisting he'd been on that block the night she vanished. He said he'd seen 2 people arguing near the alley, a woman and a man who kept his body turned away from the streetlights. He said he'd assumed it was a couple fighting, nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering, until he heard the metallic clang on the news and felt his stomach drop. He hadn't come forward earlier because he'd been drunk, because he hadn't wanted to involve himself, because time had convinced him it was safer to forget. Detectives brought him in. Sobriety sharpened his memory just enough to hurt. He couldn't identify faces. He couldn't swear to words. But he remembered the posture, the way the man blocked the alley mouth with casual authority, the way the woman's hands were raised not in fear yet, but in protest. He remembered the clang. He remembered how quickly it ended. 30 seconds, maybe less. That was all it took. They walked him through the alley reconstruction. His breathing changed when they reached the spot where a dumpster used to sit, exactly where the mix spike aligned. He nodded without being asked. The city outside kept roaring, indifferent to the small human sounds trying to resurface. Another almost witness. Another piece that fit without locking. The suspect's attorney moved fast, issuing statements, threatening defamation suits, framing the renewed attention as harassment fueled by rumor. The suspect himself stopped going to work, citing stress. Friends closed ranks. The pressure had found him at last, but pressure doesn't equal proof. It just makes people sweat. Investigators shifted tactics, focusing not on what he did that night, but on what he did afterward. Sudden moves leave trails. Storage units. Short-term rentals. Cash withdrawals timed to moments when panic would peak. They found a unit rented under a variation of his name 3 weeks after the disappearance, vacated 2 months later, contents long gone. The manager remembered him because he'd paid in cash and asked too many questions about surveillance. Another coincidence. Another thread. They subpoenaed landfill records, cross-referenced routes, traced where trash from that neighborhood went in early 2001. The phone, if destroyed as the tipper claimed, would have been scattered beyond recovery. But the battery might not have been. Batteries survive. Sometimes they resurface years later, inert and accusatory. Teams searched anyway, a ritual as much as an investigation, knowing the odds and refusing to accept them. Meanwhile, the anonymous tip became a presence again, not through calls, but through absence. Detectives felt certain the caller was watching, reading coverage, waiting. They crafted statements with that in mind, careful with language, strategic with omission. If guilt was the motivator, pressure might loosen it. If malice was, exposure might redirect it. Either way, the city became a message board, every headline a signal flare. Her family broke their silence with a single sentence released through an advocate. They asked for anyone with knowledge to come forward, not for justice, but for truth. The word truth carried more weight than closure. Closure suggests an ending. Truth just suggests honesty. The response was immediate and brutal. Support poured in alongside accusations and theories. The internet turned the case into a battleground, each side convinced they were closer to reality than the people actually chasing it. Late that fall, a second anonymous communication arrived. Not a call, but a letter, postmarked from a town near where the suspect had moved years earlier. The handwriting was careful, almost architectural. The content was spare. It referenced the alley, the clang, the gloves. It claimed the tipper hadn't spoken sooner because fear calcifies over time, because loyalty can rot into something uglier, because sometimes the truth feels safer when it belongs to no one. It stopped short of naming the suspect. It stopped short of confession. It ended with a warning. Dig in the wrong place, and you'll never find what you're looking for. Forensic linguists compared it to the call transcripts. Patterns matched. Cadence. Word choice. A mind accustomed to control. The question shifted. Was the tipper an accomplice? A witness? Or someone close enough to feel implicated without being legally responsible? That ambiguity became the case's new center of gravity. They re-interviewed the suspect with the letter on the table. He read it once, then again, jaw tight. He asked who sent it. When told they didn't know, his relief was visible and fleeting. He said it proved nothing. He said people lie. He said New York had always wanted a villain. His lawyer cut in, ended it. But the room remembered his face when he recognized the words without admitting it.
Winter settled in.
Snow softened the city's edges, muffled sound, made everything feel briefly clean. The alley filled and emptied with slush, the ground remembering what the sky forgot. Detectives kept working, chasing secondary figures now, anyone connected to the suspect who might have known more than they'd said. An old roommate, a distant cousin, a friend who'd helped him move on short notice. Each interview added texture, not clarity. The story grew denser, harder to see through. The media grew impatient. Why no arrest? What are they waiting for? The answer was always the same. Because once you pull that trigger, there's no second shot. A failed prosecution would freeze the case forever. The suspect would walk clean. The cold case would turn glacial. Another anniversary arrived. Vigils lit the sidewalk near the bar, candles flickering against brick. Names were spoken. Promises repeated. The city paused for a moment, the way it does when reminded of its own capacity for loss. And then it moved on again, because it always does. Behind the scenes, one detail refused to settle. The clang. Technicians re-examined it yet again, layering frequencies, isolating echoes. They matched it to recordings of dumpsters, lids, metal-on-metal impacts. One match stood out. The sound of a steel service door slamming shut, the kind found at the back of older buildings along that block. Doors that led into basements. Doors that weren't meant for public use.
Doors that could swallow sound and light at the same time.
They mapped those doors. 3 existed in 2001. 2 had been sealed during renovations. 1 remained, repurposed but intact. The building's basement records were incomplete, maintenance logs spotty. Investigators requested access anyway, crawling through a space that smelled of damp and dust, the past clinging to concrete. They found nothing tangible. No blood. No belongings. But absence can speak. Basements are places people choose when they don't want to be seen. The case hovered there, on the edge of something decisive and just out of reach. The suspect slept poorly. The tipper stayed silent. The family waited. The city breathed. And the cold case, stirred too many times to rest, refused to go quiet, carrying its unanswered questions forward, insisting that somewhere between fear and memory, the truth was still alive. By the time spring returned, the case had taken on a second life, one that moved in whispers and side glances rather than press conferences. The task force understood something fundamental now. If the truth was going to surface, it wouldn't come from the suspect directly. It would come from the pressure around him, from the small fractures that form when people carry someone else's secret for too long. They began tracing relationships that had once seemed irrelevant. Not lovers or rivals, but helpers. The kind of people who show up when you ask them to, who don't ask questions because they don't want the answers. One name kept resurfacing, Faint at first, then louder. A friend from the early 2000s. Same neighborhood. Same nights out. Same sudden departure from New York, only weeks after the disappearance. Back then, it had been dismissed as coincidence. Now, coincidence felt like a luxury no one could afford. He lived quietly now, far from the city, married, employed, unremarkable. The kind of man who blends into hardware store aisles and PDA meetings. When detectives contacted him, he agreed to talk almost immediately, a response that raised eyebrows. People with nothing to hide often hesitate. People with something to lose sometimes don't. He spoke carefully, choosing words that revealed nothing and everything at once. He admitted knowing the suspect well in 2001. Admitted late nights, shared routines, the kind of friendship built on proximity rather than trust. When asked about the night she vanished, his hands tightened around a paper cup until the rim bent. He said he didn't remember specifics. He said it was a long time ago. He said New York had been chaotic back then. Each sentence came out smooth, practiced. But when detectives mentioned the basement door, the clang, the gloves, his breathing changed. It was subtle. It was enough. They pressed, not with accusations, but with silence. Silence is a mirror. Eventually, he spoke again, quieter now. He said he'd gotten a call late that night. He said the voice on the other end sounded wrong, rushed, compressed. He said he'd been asked for help, just for a ride, just to get out of the city for a while. He said he didn't know why at the time. He said he'd told himself it wasn't his business. The ride, he claimed, had happened before dawn. No details about where they went. No details about what was in the trunk. Just that the suspect had been pale, shaking, repeating the same sentence over and over. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Detectives asked him to repeat it.
He did.
The words landed differently the second time, heavier, less defensible. He insisted he hadn't known about a crime. Insisted he hadn't asked questions. Insisted he'd dropped the suspect off and driven away, choosing ignorance because it was easier than responsibility. That was the story. It wasn't a confession. It was something adjacent to one. Enough to shake the room. Prosecutors listened carefully, weighing every syllable. Accomplice liability loomed, complicated by time and memory and self-preservation. If the friend was telling the truth, he'd helped after the fact. If he wasn't, he was shaping a narrative that kept him just far enough from the center to survive. Either way, he was now bound to the case in a way he hadn't been before. They confronted the suspect again, this time with the friend's account laid out like a map. The suspect's reaction was immediate and unguarded. Anger flashed first, then something like panic. He called the friend a liar. He said betrayal had a way of inventing stories. He demanded to know what deal had been offered. When told there was none, his outrage curdled into silence. Behind the scenes, the anonymous tipper's letter took on new meaning. Loyalty.
Fear. Rot.
The words aligned too neatly with a friend's hesitation, his years of quiet compliance. Investigators began to suspect the tipper wasn't an outsider at all, but someone inside the circle, someone who'd reached a breaking point when silence stopped feeling protective and started feeling lethal. They compared handwriting again, this time against old notes the friend had written in unrelated contexts. The match wasn't definitive. It rarely is. But similarities stacked up. The careful spacing. The controlled slant. The need for order. Linguists cautioned against overreach. Patterns persuade, but they don't prove. The friend was offered immunity discussions, cautiously framed. A truth in exchange for protection. He asked for time. Time in a cold case is both currency and enemy. Days passed. Then weeks. Every delay tightened the knot. Meanwhile, new forensic work returned from the lab, quiet and devastating. Fibers from the folded bag matched the synthetic blend found in gloves sold at a specific supplier, one the suspect and his friend had both used on job sites that year. Narrowing the source didn't prove guilt. It did narrow the universe. Coincidence shrank again. The city caught wind of developments without understanding them, rumors outpacing facts. Social media turned speculative, then vicious. The friend's name leaked. His family retreated. The suspect's house was photographed, commented on, mapped. The case stopped being an investigation and became a spectacle, something prosecutors feared almost as much as losing. Her family stayed quiet, absorbing updates in private meetings that felt both too detailed and not detailed enough. They asked one question repeatedly: is this real progress, or another loop? Detectives didn't answer directly. They talked about momentum, about alignment, about how cases sometimes move in inches before they move in miles. Late one night, the friend called. No intermediaries. No lawyer. Just a voice, exhausted. He said he couldn't carry it anymore. He said he'd been young and scared and stupid. He said he'd told himself he wasn't responsible for what he didn't see. He said that lie had cost him sleep for nearly 20 years. What he offered wasn't the location of a body. It was worse and better at the same time. He described the basement.
The door.
The moment he'd realized something irreversible had happened. He described helping move items, not knowing what mattered, just following instructions because stopping felt impossible. He said he'd never seen her alive or dead. He said he'd heard enough to know she wasn't leaving that basement on her own. Detectives recorded everything, their faces careful, unreadable. This was the threshold they'd been waiting for. Testimony that could anchor a case. Or sink it. They asked him to repeat details. They asked him to draw maps. They asked him to stay on the line. When dawn broke, the city woke up unaware that something fundamental had shifted. Prosecutors convened. Warrants were drafted. Risks were calculated with surgical precision. The friend's account was powerful, but it was still an account. Memory filtered through guilt and time. The defense would tear it apart. They needed corroboration. Teams returned to the basement with fresh eyes, guided by the friend's description. Measurements lined up. Scratches on a doorframe made sense now. Old renovations explained gaps that had once looked like nothing. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed, its signals painting abstract pictures of what lay beneath concrete. Shapes emerged. Disturbances. Not proof. Not yet. The suspect was watched closely, his routines catalogued, his phone silent. He sensed the net tightening. People always do. He canceled plans. He paced. He looked like a man waiting for a knock he knew was coming. The cold case stood at the edge of transformation, balanced between accusation and action. Years of absence pressed against the present, demanding resolution. Somewhere between a friend's confession and a suspect's silence, the truth strained to take shape, fragile and volatile. The city held its breath without knowing why, unaware that the story it had almost forgotten was about to change, again, in ways no one could fully control. The knock didn't come right away. Prosecutors waited because waiting is what this case had taught them to do, and because timing can mean the difference between a charge that holds and one that collapses under its own weight. They reviewed the friend's statement again and again, listening not just for what he said, but for what he couldn't avoid saying. Fear leaves fingerprints. So does truth. The lines blurred, overlapped, refused to stay neatly labeled. Ground-penetrating radar returned more data, dense and unsatisfying. Disturbances under concrete that could be anything and everything. Old pipes, settled soil, or something that had been moved, deliberately, and then hidden by the city's endless renovations. Digging would require warrants stacked on warrants, justification layered over uncertainty. The defense would call it a fishing expedition. The judge would listen. Time would keep passing. They shifted focus again, this time to the suspect's behavior in the present, because the present is where people slip. Surveillance logs filled with small, telling details. The way he checked his mirrors too often. The way he paused when passing construction sites, eyes lingering on heavy equipment as if measuring possibilities. He made no calls. He sent no messages. Silence again, but this time it felt defensive. Then came the mistake. It was minor, almost invisible. He accessed an old email account late one night, one he hadn't touched in years. Investigators caught it because they were watching everything now. The account held nothing explicit, nothing criminal. But the timing mattered. People revisit old things when they're bracing for impact, when they want to know what's still out there that could hurt them. The account linked to an address near the alley, an address he'd once used to receive packages.
Gloves. Tools.
Ordinary things that had taken on extraordinary weight. Prosecutors decided to move. They sought a limited warrant, careful and narrow, to search a storage facility connected to the suspect through that old address. The unit had changed hands since 2001, emptied and refilled, but records showed a brief overlap during the weeks after the disappearance. The current renter watched in confusion as investigators worked, apologetic and methodical, cataloging dust and debris like archaeologists. Most of it was junk. Broken furniture. Rusted metal. Then, behind a false panel, they found a small, sealed container. Inside were fragments. Plastic shards. A circuit board, cracked and incomplete. A battery casing, scorched at the edges. A phone, or what remained of one. Not identifiable on its own. Not traceable in the traditional sense. But the model matched what she'd owned. The damage matched the tipper's description. Destruction by force, not accident. It wasn't definitive. It was devastating. The find shifted everything. The friend's testimony gained gravity. The anonymous tip took on a sharper edge. Prosecutors authorized an arrest, not for murder, not yet, but on charges that could hold him in place while the larger case assembled. Evidence tampering. Obstruction. Lesser crimes with heavier implications. The knock came at dawn, the way it always does in stories like this, quiet and unavoidable.
He didn't resist.
He didn't ask why. He asked who else had talked. When they didn't answer, he nodded once, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. The city woke to headlines that felt both premature and overdue. Cold case arrest in 2001 disappearance. The word cracked hovered again, tempting and dangerous. Interrogation rooms have a way of compressing time. Hours pass like minutes. Minutes stretch into something unbearable. He sat across from detectives, hands folded, posture rigid. When shown the phone fragments, his composure fractured. Not completely. Just enough. He said they weren't his. He said lots of people use that model. He said storage units get messy. His voice stayed even, but his eyes betrayed him, darting away from the evidence as if it might speak on its own. They brought in the friend's recorded statement. Played the part where he described the call, the ride, the words it wasn't supposed to go like that. The suspect's jaw tightened. He called the friend a coward. He said people rewrite history to save themselves. He said nothing about the basement. Nothing about the door. Silence, again, but now it felt selective. News vans crowded the street. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, trying to reconcile the man they knew with the one being described on their screens. His family released a statement asking for privacy, insisting on innocence. Her family said nothing. They'd learned that words can be taken from you. The anonymous tipper did not surface. No calls. No letters. Investigators debated whether the arrest would draw them out or drive them deeper underground. Either outcome carried risk. If the tipper was the friend, the role was already clear. If it was someone else, someone closer, the silence suggested fear stronger than relief. Court proceedings moved slowly, deliberate as molasses. The defense attacked the phone fragments, the radar data, the witness memory. They painted a picture of desperation masquerading as progress, of a department under pressure to solve a case that had embarrassed it for years. Jurors listened, skeptical and human, aware that time complicates truth. Behind the scenes, investigators kept digging, literally and figuratively. They revisited the basement yet again, this time with permission to remove concrete. The work was slow, loud, invasive. Chunks fell away to reveal older layers, stains that testing later dismissed as nothing of forensic value. Disappointment settled heavy, familiar. They hadn't expected a body. They'd hoped for something smaller. A button. A fiber. Anything that could speak without memory's distortions. The suspect was released on bail, conditions strict, movements limited. Freedom tasted thin. He avoided cameras, avoided neighbors, avoided mirrors. The case followed him everywhere, an invisible escort. The city argued over his guilt in comment sections and kitchens, convinced and unconvinced in equal measure. As weeks passed, the prosecution's theory solidified even as its foundation trembled. A confrontation in the alley, a struggle pulled into the basement, an accidental death, or an intentional act, the line blurred by panic. A cover-up aided by a friend. Evidence destroyed, scattered, buried under time and concrete. It was a story that made sense. That doesn't mean it was true. The cold case stood in a precarious place now, no longer dormant, not yet resolved. It had names attached, faces scrutinized, fragments catalogued. It had momentum. Momentum can carry you forward. It can also carry you off a cliff. And somewhere beyond the reach of warrants and headlines, the one person who might still know everything watched and waited, calculating whether the truth was finally safe to tell, or still too dangerous to release. The courtroom was colder than anyone expected, not in temperature but in temperament, a place where emotion goes to be stripped down and weighed like contraband. When proceedings resumed, the case entered a phase that felt both inevitable and surreal, where years of shadow became exhibits and arguments, where absence had to be explained in the language of law. The suspect sat at the defense table, face composed, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, as if refusing to grant the room any power over him. Prosecutors laid out their narrative carefully, each step measured, each claim hedged with caution. They spoke of opportunity, of proximity, of behavior that deviated just enough from the norm to demand scrutiny. They spoke of the alley, the basement door, the sound at 12:19 that refused to be anything else once you'd heard it. They introduced the phone fragments, held up in evidence bags like relics, their broken edges catching the light. They reminded the jury that destruction can be as meaningful as preservation. The defense countered with certainty's enemy, doubt. They questioned memory, especially memory stretched across decades. They questioned technology, the limits of enhancement, the temptation to see shapes where none exist. They questioned the friend's motives, painted him as a man bargaining with his conscience and his freedom, willing to say whatever kept him safe. They asked why, if a crime had occurred, there was no body, no definitive trace, no moment that could be pointed to and named without qualifiers. Outside the courthouse, cameras rolled and commentators sharpened their takes. The phrase "cold case cracked" appeared again, louder than ever, even as the reality inside remained fragile. Public opinion hardened into camps. Some saw a monster finally cornered. Others saw a man crushed by coincidence and time. The city argued with itself, as it always does when certainty feels close but never quite arrives. The anonymous tipper remained absent, a presence defined by negative space. Investigators wondered if the courtroom would draw them out, if the gravity of formal accusation would loosen whatever restraint had kept them silent. Days passed. Nothing. Silence can be louder than testimony when you're waiting for it to break. Then, unexpectedly, it did, not through a confession, but through a mistake. A journalist received an email from an untraceable account, subject line empty, body consisting of a single paragraph that referenced a detail never made public, the exact orientation of the basement door, the way it opened inward, the way sound would fold back on itself when it slammed. The message didn't name the suspect. It didn't claim responsibility. It asked one question and nothing else. Do you still think accidents don't leave patterns? The reporter forwarded it to authorities. Forensic analysis confirmed what they already suspected. Same linguistic markers. Same cadence. The anonymous tipper was watching the trial, reacting to it, unable to stay completely invisible. Prosecutors debated their next move. Subpoenaing media risks exposure. Exposure risks losing the voice entirely. They chose restraint. Sometimes the best trap is patience. Inside the courtroom, the friend took the stand. His voice shook at first, then steadied, as if the act of speaking had been rehearsed in his mind for years. He described the call, the urgency, the drive before dawn. He avoided adjectives, stuck to actions, aware that embellishment would destroy him. When asked why he hadn't come forward sooner, he paused, long enough for the room to lean in. He said fear doesn't age well. He said it grows teeth. Cross-examination was brutal. The defense picked apart inconsistencies, highlighted gaps, suggested motives. They asked about immunity, about pressure, about the benefits of cooperation. He didn't deny any of it. He admitted he was scared. He admitted he wanted protection. He admitted he'd made selfish choices. The honesty landed harder than denial would have. Jurors shifted in their seats, uncomfortable and attentive. The suspect watched him without expression. When their eyes met, something flickered: recognition, anger, regret, impossible to name. The friend looked away first. Experts testified next, each one careful to stay within the bounds of what science could support. The audio analyst explained the metallic sound, its frequency profile, the reasons it aligned with a steel door rather than a dumpster lid. The defense countered with their own expert, equally credentialed, equally cautious, who suggested alternative explanations. Two truths coexisted, incompatible and plausible. The jury listened, weighed, wondered. Days blurred. Evidence piled up without ever quite tipping the scale. Prosecutors felt it slipping, the way cases do when they ask too much of inference and not enough of certainty. They needed something new, something that didn't rely on memory or interpretation. It came from an unexpected place. A former maintenance worker from the building with the basement door contacted investigators after seeing coverage. He'd worked there briefly in 2002 during renovations prompted by unspecified damage in the basement. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it. Now, prompted by the details he'd heard, he remembered being instructed to remove and replace a section of flooring near the door, concrete poured over concrete, no explanation given. He remembered thinking it was excessive. He remembered the foreman telling him not to ask questions. Records were sparse.
Contractors change.
Paperwork disappears. But the timing aligned. The location aligned. The story fit the shape of what investigators believed had happened. The worker had nothing to gain by coming forward. No immunity to seek. No past to protect. His testimony wasn't definitive. It was cumulative. Another layer added to a structure already under strain. The defense objected, argued relevance, argued prejudice. The judge allowed it, with limitations. The jury heard enough to imagine. Imagination is dangerous in court. It fills gaps evidence cannot. The suspect's demeanor changed after that. Subtle shifts. Restlessness. A glance toward the door that led nowhere. His lawyer leaned in more often, whispered longer. When asked if he wished to testify, he declined, invoking his right with a calm that felt rehearsed. Silence again. A final, formal silence. Closing arguments approached like weather. Prosecutors urged the jury to consider the totality, the convergence of details that pointed in one direction. The defense urged them to remember the burden of proof, the sanctity of doubt. Both were right. That was the problem. Deliberations stretched into days. The city waited, refreshing feeds, speculating, projecting. Her family waited quietly, having learned that anticipation can be its own cruelty. Investigators replayed the case in their heads, second-guessing choices, wondering which thread they'd pulled too hard or not hard enough. When the jury returned, the room held its breath. The verdict was read, measured, and restrained. Guilty on the obstruction-related charges. Not guilty on the most serious counts. A split decision that satisfied no one and offended everyone. The suspect would face consequences, but not the ones that mattered most. The word murder remained legally unspoken. Outside, reactions fractured. Some called it justice delayed and denied. Others called it restraint, a system working as designed. The suspect was led away, expression unreadable, a man both condemned and free. The friend exhaled, relief tangled with shame. Prosecutors absorbed the outcome in silence, already thinking about appeals, about what remained possible. The anonymous tipper sent nothing. No victory lap.
No lament.
Just silence, heavier now, more deliberate. The cold case had changed shape again, refusing to settle into resolution. It had brushed against truth, left fingerprints on it, and still let it slip through. As night fell, The alley stood empty, the basement door locked, the city's noise rising to fill every gap. Somewhere between verdict and doubt, the story continued, unfinished and unwilling to be forgotten. A reminder that some cases don't end when the court adjourns. They end when someone finally decides they can't carry the weight anymore. The verdict didn't quiet the case. It rearranged it. What followed wasn't closure but aftershock, the kind that rattles long after the ground stops moving. The suspect was sentenced on the lesser charges, months measured against decades, a punishment that felt symbolic at best. He walked into custody with his head high, walked out on supervised release with the same controlled expression, a man officially sanctioned and unofficially accused. The law had spoken. The truth, apparently, had not. Public interest surged again, fueled by dissatisfaction. Cold cases are supposed to end cleanly, or not at all. This one had done neither. Talk shows debated the meaning of justice. Commentators argued intent versus outcome. The phrase cold case cracked was quietly retired by more careful outlets, replaced with something less triumphant and more accurate. Cold case fractured. The city absorbed it uneasy. Investigators regrouped because unresolved cases don't respect verdicts. The obstruction conviction had opened doors they hadn't been able to touch before. Subpoenas extended further. Old associates, once shielded by irrelevance, found themselves under renewed scrutiny. The suspect's past was no longer theoretical. It was admissible. The friend, now officially on record, became both asset and liability. He lived under a cloud of conditional protection, his cooperation documented, his credibility fragile. Some nights he called detectives just to talk, voice strained, circling the same details as if repetition might turn them into absolution. He insisted he'd told everything he knew. Investigators believed he believed that. Belief, however, isn't evidence. Then quietly the anonymous tipper made another move. Not a call. Not a letter. A package arrived at the office of a civil attorney known for representing families in wrongful death suits. No return address. Inside, photocopies of old utility maps, zoning overlays from the late 1990s, handwritten annotations marking a path from the alley to a service corridor that ran beneath multiple buildings. A note was clipped to the top, the paper yellowed, the ink deliberate. It read, "People think basements end at walls. They don't." The implication was chilling. Investigators had treated the basement as a single, contained space. The maps suggested otherwise, a forgotten network of utility passages sealed off over time, places no one thought to look because no one remembered they existed. The city is layered like sediment. What's buried isn't always deep. Sometimes it's just forgotten. Accessing those corridors required coordination, permits, cooperation from property owners who'd never heard of them. It took weeks. When teams finally entered, they moved slowly, lights cutting through dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The passages were narrow, uneven, their concrete scarred by decades of maintenance and neglect. They found debris, tools, remnants of old construction. Nothing with a name attached. Nothing that could be logged as hers. But they did find signs of alteration. A section where newer concrete interrupted older pours. A seam that didn't belong. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed disturbances consistent with removal and replacement. Not a grave. Not exactly. More like a thorough erasure. Something had been there. Someone had wanted it gone. The anonymous tipper didn't need to say it. The message was clear enough. Whatever happened hadn't ended in that basement. It had passed through it, used it, then moved on. Investigators chased the implication outward, re-examining routes, exits, access points. A service elevator long decommissioned. A loading dock that fed into a different block. A narrow window of time when a vehicle could have moved unnoticed, shielded by routine. The city, again, had helped by being busy. The suspect was questioned once more, this time about the corridors. He claimed ignorance, scoffed at the idea, said people were seeing patterns because they wanted to. When shown the maps, he leaned back and laughed, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. He said if someone wanted to hide something in New York, they had 1,000 better options. The statement rang true and hollow at the same time. Media got wind of the corridors and ran with it, visuals looping over blueprints and animations. Public imagination filled in what evidence couldn't. Some believed the body had been moved out of state. Others believed it had never existed in a recoverable form.
Conspiracy bloomed. So did despair.
Her family watched it unfold with a kind of practiced distance. They'd learned not to attach themselves to theories. They asked one thing, over and over in private meetings: is there anything new that tells us where she is? The answer, each time, was no. The anonymous tipper sent one final message, this time to investigators directly, encrypted and brief. It acknowledged the verdict without commenting on it. It acknowledged the corridors without confirming them. It ended with a line that felt less like a clue and more like a confession without ownership. You're looking for remains when you should be looking for responsibility. Then the channel went dark. Investigators debated what that meant. Some thought it was a warning that the truth would never take physical form. Others thought it was a challenge, a final nudge towards something more abstract but no less damning. Responsibility spreads. It dilutes. It hides in systems and silence, in choices made and not made. As months passed, the case lost its headline status again, settling into a quieter, heavier place. But it didn't freeze. It couldn't. Too many people had touched it now. Too many threads had been pulled. The cold case had become a living thing, sustained by unresolved tension rather than evidence alone. The alley remained unchanged, the basement sealed, the corridors locked behind permits and paperwork. The suspect lived under supervision, constrained but unbroken. The friend tried to rebuild a life with a truth that refused to stay put. The tipper disappeared into the noise they'd once disrupted. And somewhere in the city's underlayers, in the forgotten spaces between buildings and years, the story lingered, incomplete and insistent. Not solved, not silent, waiting for the moment when someone, finally, would decide that carrying it was worse than letting it go. Time didn't cool the case. It thinned it, like metal stretched too far, until every remaining strand mattered. In the year that followed the corridor's revelation, the investigation stopped chasing spectacle and turned inward, quieter, more surgical. This is what happens when the obvious has been exhausted. You stop asking what happened and start asking who kept it from being known. Responsibility became the word no one wanted to say out loud. Not guilt. Responsibility. The kind that lives in pauses and choices, in the decision to look away, to accept a favor, to keep driving when you should have turned back. Investigators mapped responsibility the way they'd mapped the alley, marking nodes where silence had been chosen over action. The suspect, the friend, the contractors, the foreman, the unnamed others who'd followed instructions without context. The city itself, with its blind spots and erasures. They reopened financial records tied to the renovations, combing through invoices and subcontractor payments from 2001 and 2002. Most were mundane. One stood out. A rush order. Premium cost. No detailed scope of work, just a line item labeled remediation. Not unusual on its face. Unusual in timing. Unusual in location. The payment traced back to a shell company that dissolved within a year. Paper companies are supposed to disappear. Sometimes they disappear too well. A retired accountant recognized the structure immediately. He'd seen it before, not criminal in itself, but convenient. A way to pay for something without explaining why. When asked who authorized it, he shrugged. Names blur after 20 years. But he remembered the urgency. He remembered being told to move fast. Investigators tried to follow the money further and hit the familiar wall. Records gone. Banks merged. Files purged. Time again, doing what it does best. Still, the existence of the payment mattered. It suggested planning after the fact. Cleanup. Not panic alone. Deliberation. The suspect's supervision conditions allowed limited travel, monitored and predictable. He complied rigidly, the way people do when they believe rules are shields. He avoided interviews. He avoided statements. Silence had become his strategy, and so far it was working. Every appeal from prosecutors stalled on the same obstacle. Without new physical evidence, There was no path forward that didn't risk collapsing what little accountability already existed. The friend drifted to the edge of the case, his usefulness diminished now that his story had been absorbed and contested. He tried to live quietly, but quiet isn't an option when your name is attached to a public absence. He received letters he never opened. He stopped answering unknown numbers. Some nights, he drove aimlessly, retracing routes he wished he could forget, as if repetition might turn memory into something manageable. Then, unexpectedly, a third figure surfaced. Not the tipper. Someone else. A former city inspector, recently retired, contacted investigators through counsel. He said he'd reviewed permits for that block years ago, back when paperwork still moved through human hands. He said there had been pressure to sign off on a modification he didn't fully understand, pressure that came from above and sideways at the same time. He said he'd done it because everyone does eventually, because resistance has a cost. He brought copies, not originals. Photographs he'd taken for his own protection and then forgotten about. They showed the basement plans before and after the renovations. The differences were subtle. A wall shifted, a corridor sealed, a drain rerouted. Each change defensible on its own. Together, they formed a pattern of concealment that was hard to ignore. Prosecutors examined the material and felt the familiar mix of excitement and dread. This wasn't proof of a killing. It was proof of intent to hide something. Intent, finally, that could be argued without relying on memory alone. They prepared motions, careful to frame the evidence as systemic rather than speculative. The defense responded predictably, arguing relevance, arguing scope, arguing that cities change all the time and not every change is a crime. The judge listened, asked questions, requested additional briefing. Time stretched again. Public reaction was muted this time.
No frenzy. No hashtags.
Fatigue had set in. The city had learned how to live with the uncertainty, how to compartmentalize it. Only the people closest to the case felt the pressure building, the sense that this might be the last meaningful turn before the story settled into permanent ambiguity. The anonymous tipper did not reappear. Investigators wondered if they'd reached the limit of what fear could produce, if the remaining truth was too implicating, too intertwined with too many people to be released without consequence. Sometimes silence isn't cowardice. Sometimes it's an assessment. Her family marked another year quietly.
No statements. No cameras.
They visited places she'd loved, said her name where no one could argue with it. They'd stopped asking when. They asked who. Who decided she could vanish? Who decided that was acceptable? Late one evening, as files were being reorganized yet again, a detective noticed a small inconsistency that had survived every review. A timestamp discrepancy between two systems that should have synced. Minutes off. Not much, but enough to suggest manual override. Someone, somewhere, had adjusted a clock. Not to erase an event. To align it with something else. Control leaves marks. This was one of them. They traced it to a building management system, old and poorly documented. Access logs were incomplete, but one user ID appeared repeatedly during the renovation window. It belonged to a contractor who died years earlier. Dead men don't explain themselves, but their actions still ripple. The cold case felt close again, not to resolution, but to understanding. Understanding that what had happened wasn't a single act in a single moment, but a chain, each link forged by choice. The law prefers singular villains. Reality often offers networks. As winter crept back in, the case hovered in that narrow space between exposure and exhaustion. Enough had been revealed to disturb the surface forever. Not enough to drain the depths. The alley stood. The corridors slept. The city moved on. And somewhere, in the overlap between responsibility and silence, the truth waited, intact but fragmented, daring someone to decide that knowing it mattered more than the consequences of saying it out loud. By the 10th year after the alley was torn open, the case no longer felt like an investigation. It felt like an endurance test. Who would blink first? The law, the witnesses, the city, or the truth itself? The timestamp anomaly refused to stay small. What began as a technical footnote became a thread that pulled at everything around it. Building management systems from that era weren't smart, but they were stubborn. They only changed when told to. Someone had accessed the controls during a window that coincided with the renovations, not to shut anything down, not to erase footage, but to bend time just enough to make one movement appear earlier than it was, and another later. It was choreography. Crude, but deliberate. Investigators rebuilt the timeline with the adjusted clock removed. The result was unsettling. The suspect's documented movements no longer fit as cleanly. A phone ping that once placed him across town now floated in ambiguity. A badge swipe that had seemed conclusive drifted out of alignment. Alibis rely on time the way buildings rely on foundations. Shift it, and everything creaks. The defense noticed the shift immediately and moved to contain it, arguing that unreliable systems produce unreliable conclusions. They weren't wrong. But unreliability cuts both ways. It meant the story that had protected their client for 2 decades was no longer solid either. Certainty evaporated. Doubt spread. A hearing was scheduled.
Closed. No cameras.
Inside the courtroom, the case was stripped of its mythology and reduced to its bones.
Logs.
Schematics. Payment trails. Human behavior under pressure. Prosecutors didn't argue that they knew exactly what happened. They argued that what had been presented as certainty was manufactured, that the absence everyone had accepted was, at minimum, curated. The judge asked a question that landed like a dropped glass. If the timeline was altered, why not erase it completely? Why leave traces? The answer was simple and terrifying. Because the goal wasn't disappearance. It was plausibility. Total erasure invites scrutiny. Minor adjustments fade into noise. Outside, word leaked. Not details. A feeling that something foundational had cracked. Journalists dusted off old notes. Podcasts revived dormant episodes. The phrase cold case re-entered headlines, now paired with a new word, manipulation. The community reacted differently this time. Less outrage. More unease. The sense that they'd been living inside a version of events chosen for them. The suspect's silence grew heavier. It was no longer strategic. It was defensive. Friends distanced themselves. Former allies stopped returning calls. When the story changes, loyalties reassess. He retained new counsel. Younger. Sharper. Less interested in preserving the past than surviving the future. The friend was called back in, not as a witness, but as context. He listened as investigators laid out the revised timeline. He said nothing at first. Then he asked for water. Then he said something he'd never said before. That there had been a moment, brief and stupid, when he'd considered going back that night. When something in his gut had told him the evening wasn't done. He hadn't acted on it. He'd told himself that was maturity. Hearing it now, he wasn't so sure. Regret is not evidence. But it changes how stories are heard. The city inspector watched the coverage from his living room and turned the volume down. He'd done what he could. He'd given them the cracks in the walls. What they did with them was out of his hands. Still, he felt exposed. When systems start being questioned, everyone who ever touched them wonders if their fingerprints will be next. Late one night, another message arrived at the tip line. Not anonymous this time.
A name.
A former night security supervisor for a neighboring building. He was old.
Sick.
He said he didn't have much time and didn't want to carry it anymore. He hadn't seen a body. He hadn't seen a crime. He'd seen something moved where it didn't belong, at an hour that didn't make sense, by people who acted like they had permission. Investigators met him in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and resignation. His memory wavered on details, but held firm on emotion. The unease. The insistence that he forget it. The look on one man's face when he realized he'd been noticed. Fear, not of being caught, but of being remembered. They took his statement knowing exactly how it would be attacked. Too late. Too vague. Too convenient. Still, it joined the pile, another weight pressing down on the scale. As winter ended, prosecutors faced a decision they'd been postponing. Move forward with what they had and risk everything. Or wait and accept that waiting might be the same as letting it die. Cold cases don't end loudly. They fade unless someone forces an ending. They filed. Not the charges everyone expected. Narrower. Procedural. Conspiracy to obstruct. Falsification of records. Crimes that didn't require them to prove exactly how she disappeared, only that her disappearance had been engineered into acceptability. The reaction was immediate and fractured. Some called it cowardice. Others called it the only honest move left. The family said nothing. They'd learned that words didn't move the needle. As the court date approached, the city held its breath. Not because justice felt close, but because illusion felt fragile. For years, the case had been a question mark. Now it was a mirror, reflecting how easily truth could be bent when enough people agreed to look away. And in that reflection, one thing became clear. Even if no verdict ever named what happened in that alley, the story the city had told itself was already gone. The cold case had done what it always threatened to do. It had changed everything. The courtroom never heard the word closure. It heard procedure, burden, standard. It heard arguments about intent and access and authority, about whether adjusting a system clock constituted deception or maintenance, whether a shell company was proof of malice or merely the architecture of convenience. The room was cold in the way rooms get when emotion has been bled out of them on purpose. People spoke carefully. People avoided looking at the family. Outside, the city kept moving. Trains ran on time. Deliveries arrived. The alley remained an alley, anonymous again to anyone who didn't know what to look for. This is how unresolved cases survive. They hide in plain sight, leaning on the fact that life insists on continuing. The narrow charges did their work quietly. They forced testimony that would never have existed otherwise. Contractors who'd once shrugged now answered under oath. Administrators who'd claimed ignorance learned the cost of not remembering. The defense chipped away at credibility, at memory, at motive, but something had shifted. The narrative was no longer about a woman who vanished. It was about a system that made vanishing manageable. One witness broke. Not dramatically.
No te harts.
Just a sentence that arrived flat and unadorned. He said there had been an understanding. Not written. Not explicit. An understanding that some problems were better handled internally. He said he'd assumed it was about liability. He said he hadn't asked questions because questions slow things down. The judge asked him to clarify.
He did.
He said that at the time, it had felt normal. Normal is the most dangerous word in the room. The suspect sat very still. When his name was spoken, he did not react. When the timestamp was described again, he stared at the table as if it might offer guidance. He had lived for years inside the shelter of ambiguity. Now ambiguity was being used against him, and it showed. His counsel objected. The objections were noted. Overruled.
Allowed.
The rhythm of the day continued. Across the aisle, the friend listened with his hands folded, his face pale. He recognized pieces of the story and felt others settle into place for the first time. The moment he'd wanted to turn back. The weight he'd carried without a name. Understanding didn't absolve him. It sharpened everything. He wondered how many lives are shaped by decisions that feel insignificant until time gives them edges. The city inspector testified last. He spoke about pressure without naming names, about culture without assigning blame. He spoke the way people do when they're trying to be honest without detonating what's left of their lives. When he finished, there was a pause that felt heavier than any outburst would have. The ruling came weeks later. Mixed. Unsatisfying. Predictable. Some counts dismissed. Others allowed to proceed. No declaration of what happened that night. No map leading to remains. No sentence that matched the scale of the absence. The legal system did what it does when certainty won't cooperate. It narrowed its focus and called that justice. The headlines reflected the ambiguity. Cold case advances. Cold case stalls. Cold case reshapes. Each outlet chose its own verb. None of them chose solved. The family received the news privately. They thanked no one. They asked for nothing. They had learned, over years measured in anniversaries and unanswered calls, that expectation is a vulnerability. They stood together in the quiet that followed and felt something loosen. Not relief, not peace, something else. The end of waiting for a shape the truth might never take. After the proceedings, a reporter found the retired security supervisor sitting on a bench outside the hospital, bundled against the wind. He declined an interview.
He said he'd said what he could say.
He said some things aren't meant to be consumed. He watched the street until the light changed and then crossed slowly, as if each step mattered. The alley saw no crowds.
No memorials.
No flowers taped to brick. Only a new lock on a service door and a fresh coat of paint that did nothing to disguise the angles. People passed through without stopping. The city had learned how to carry the story without displaying it. Months later, a document surfaced in an archive no one remembered to search. Not decisive. Not revelatory. A maintenance note written in a hand that no longer existed, referencing a temporary adjustment made per instruction to facilitate workflow. It confirmed nothing and suggested everything. It joined the file, another shard of a mirror no one could fully reassemble. Time resumed its work. The suspect aged. The friend moved. The inspector gardened. The city forgot, then remembered, then forgot again. That is the rhythm of unresolved violence. It doesn't end. It fades and returns, softer each time, but never gone. On the anniversary of the disappearance, the family gathered where the river bends and the noise drops away. They spoke her name into the air and let it go. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wait for signs. They stood until the light changed, and then they left together, carrying what they'd always carried, lighter now not because it was answered, but because it had been faced. Somewhere in the machinery of the city, a clock ticked forward, unadjusted, unremarkable. It marked minutes the way minutes are meant to be marked, indifferent to alibis and narratives. The truth did not announce itself. It did not demand applause. It existed in fragments, in testimony and silence, in what had been done and what had been allowed. The cold case never closed. It did something else. It exposed how disappearance is rarely an act of darkness alone, but a collaboration with convenience, with fear, with the human talent for choosing the easier path. It left behind a warning without instructions, a story without an ending, an absence that refused to behave. And long after the court emptied and the headlines moved on, that absence remained, steady and unyielding, asking the only question that still mattered, not of the law, not of the city, but of anyone willing to listen. If this could happen here, in plain sight, with so many chances to stop it, what else have we already agreed not to see? Years later, when the paperwork had yellowed and the digital files lived on servers no one could name without checking, the case still refused to settle. It lingered in training seminars and late-night conversations, in the way new detectives were warned about assumptions, about the danger of clean timelines. It became a cautionary tale told without a title, a reminder that some investigations don't end so much as they embed themselves into the culture that failed them. A junior analyst, too young to remember 2001 as anything but a date in textbooks, stumbled across the file while auditing archival integrity. She wasn't looking for revelations. She was checking metadata, confirming migrations, ensuring nothing had been corrupted by time or software updates. Routine work. Boring work. The kind of work that doesn't make headlines. And yet, it was there, tucked inside an overlooked attachment, a system backup from the building management console, preserved accidentally because it had been mislabeled as non-essential. The data was partial, fragmented, but it carried something the case had been missing. Context. It showed not just changes, but sequences. Not just timestamps, but dependencies. When reconstructed, it revealed that the clock adjustment had been nested inside a broader maintenance routine that required dual authorization. 2 credentials. 2 approvals. One of them belonged to the contractor, already known. The other belonged to an account that had been deactivated within days of the work. A temporary credential. Issued quietly. Revoked quietly. The kind of access designed to leave no owner. The analyst flagged it and moved on, assuming someone senior would handle it. Someone did. Slowly.
Carefully.
By the time it reached the people who understood its weight, the statute of limitations had already done its work. The finding couldn't resurrect charges. It couldn't compel testimony. It could only do one thing. It could clarify. The clarification was devastating in its simplicity. The disappearance hadn't relied on improvisation alone. It had relied on coordination, on the understanding that certain levers, when pulled together, could smooth rough edges into acceptable shapes. It wasn't brilliance. It was familiarity. People using systems they knew well enough to bend without breaking. The revelations circulated quietly, shared among those who'd earned the right to be disillusioned. No press release.
No briefing.
The family was informed in a letter that avoided legal language as much as possible. It explained what had been found and what it could not do. It apologized without admitting fault. The family read it together and folded it carefully, as if it might tear if handled roughly. They didn't feel vindicated. They felt confirmed. There is a difference. The suspect never acknowledged the update. He had learned the value of waiting things out. Time had protected him once. He trusted it to do so again. His world had narrowed to routines and appointments, to conversations that avoided the past entirely. He lived with the knowledge that the truth existed somewhere beyond reach, and that knowing this was both a punishment and a shield. The friend heard about the discovery through a third party and sat with it alone. It didn't change what he could have done. It didn't change what he hadn't done. But it reframed the silence that followed that night. It told him he hadn't been imagining the weight, the sense that something larger had been set in motion without him. Understanding arrived too late to be useful, right on time to be painful. The city never officially reopened the case. It didn't need to. The story had already seeped into the cracks. Policy memos referenced it obliquely. New oversight procedures bore its fingerprints. Access controls tightened. Audit trails lengthened. These changes were presented as progress, as evolution. Few acknowledged the absence that had forced their hand. On the street, nothing looked different. The building stood. The alley echoed. People passed through with groceries and headphones, unaware of the layers beneath their feet. This is how most truths live. Not as monuments, but as substrata, shaping the present invisibly. Every so often, a journalist would ask why the case still mattered if no one would ever be convicted. The answer was never satisfying. Because it taught something uncomfortable. Because it demonstrated that disappearance can be engineered without a mastermind, that accountability can dissolve through collaboration rather than conspiracy. Because it showed how easily urgency can override ethics when the cost of slowing down feels too high. The cold case had stopped being about her long ago, at least in the public imagination. That was the quietest violence of all. Her name became shorthand, then a footnote, then a reference point in discussions about process. The family fought that erosion in small ways, telling stories that had nothing to do with the night she vanished, insisting on a life larger than its ending. On an unremarkable afternoon, the analyst who'd found the backup file walked past the alley without knowing it. She checked her phone, adjusted her bag, kept moving. Somewhere nearby, a clock ticked forward, steady and honest, marking time without permission or intent. The case did not resolve. It did not conclude. It settled into the city like a low-frequency hum, audible only to those who knew how to listen. It reminded them that truth doesn't always arrive as revelation. Sometimes it arrives as accumulation, as a series of small confirmations that, together, make denial impossible even when justice remains out of reach. And so the story persisted, not as a solved mystery, but as a living indictment of complacency, of the ease with which systems can be taught to forget. It asked no more questions. It offered no answers. It simply remained, patient and intact, waiting for a future that might decide that knowing, even without remedy, is still worth the cost.